Hey, we're live. This is Life in Tech, episode 129. I'm Jason.
He's Dan, and I'm TK.
Yeah. Jesus, man. How you guys been?
And great. You know, after all that shit happened in Game of Thrones, I went there and I beat Brandon up, threw him off the throne, and took it over again.
Oh, God.
Is that your green screen background, too, with that?
Yeah.
No, that's the real throne. What are you talking about?
Oh, shit, man. Well, I think the last time we were talking, we talked a lot about it. We were talking about like exercise tech and stuff like that, man. And TK and I now are Phoenix brothers. Mm-hmm. Dude, what a marvelous device. What a marvelous device.
How much does that give you over just wearing any of the like Android Wear or even an Apple Watch? Does it really give you that much more?
I'll give you my opinion first. Having had only the first generation Apple Watch, but having it for a long time, I find this to be vastly superior. Let me give you my explanation as to why real quick. Not only does it have, at least for how I used my Apple Watch, all the same functionality, but it has more focused on exercise and health performance, which for me, that's what I was looking at was I'm going to ride my bike to campus sometimes, and I got a computer for that. And I've been running, as you guys know, more and more, and I want to track that. And I'm tired of having all these devices with me and carrying shit and finding pockets, or your run shorts don't have whatever, right? So I wanted one device that can do it all. And this does that, and I'm sure a ton more.
I think, you know, I can compare it to the third generation Apple Watch. You get maps if you want. You know, you can basically detach it from the device. It runs more autonomous with its data, how it collects it and how it syncs it once you get back to the device. I think it's just as robust as the Apple Watch as far as information gathering, and in some cases a lot more. I like it because it's not a touch screen. Right? It's button driven, and I like that. It's not a delicate watch. It's a sapphire screen. You know, it's they'll say military grade for whatever that means. I don't, is it made for dumb people that fall down all the time, or is it rugged? Right? I don't know the difference sometimes.
Is it marine proof?
Nothing is. An anvil is not marine proof. All right. So where's Ian when we need him?
I sent him a new pack of crowns.
Let me tell you guys a quick joke about the military and things not being proofed, as it were. So there were these social scientists were going to do this experiment, and they took three distinct groups of people. They took a group of scientists from Japan, a group of engineers from Germany, and 2 SEALs. And they put them in these basically big locked rooms, kind of like massive racquetball courts, one door in, one door out, no windows. They had 2 steel balls. And they said, hey, in 24 hours, everybody make what you can. We'll be back. In the 24 hours, they come into this group of Japanese scientists, and they made a supercomputer. It's there humming along and pushing out data. They're like, wow, that's awesome. They go next door to the Germans, and they've got a big automobile there, a big touring sedan. Right? They go walk in with the team guys, and they look around, and they're both in the corner sleeping, and there's nothing there. And they're like, what happened? They go, we lost one, we broke the other one, but we got a requisition in for 10 more. Right? That's the lifestyle, right?
I like that, man. Well, you know, I think it maybe is a good actually segue into what we were talking about, that we were going to talk about, which is looking at history and finding opportunities for innovation, or, you know, repackaging an idea, or even finding something that couldn't be found before because we have new technology. That's an interesting perspective, right? You can have the same thing, these metal balls, and take different groups to interact with them, and you'll get massively different results.
Right. I think you see it now. I mean, I was recently in North Dakota, and we're talking to some of the tech folks there, and they have.
Hold on. There's tech folks in North Dakota?
Actually, there's quite a bit. Actually, the governor is a tech billionaire, so they are moving quite quickly and efficiently to become a tech hub. They have a comprehensive program now that is going to be initiated pretty soon, where they call it Cyber K through PhD, and they are in the because they everything is integrated at the state education level. They are going to be able to start with Hello World with a kindergartner all the way up to very advanced things, depending on what level you want. But the goal is to create, at a minimum, a cyber literate society within North Dakota. And because of the oil revenue and everything like that, they have the means to be able to do this. And it's driven by a very proactive, high-tech governor who's brought in his CIO was the CIO at the Mayo Clinic, right? All the people are just top shelf technologists, and they're really changing the way people look at that. And one of the things that they've had in the past, where they would have a guy that would go out and kind of measure the temperature of roads, right, and whether you could pass in the wintertime for big heavy trucks, right, what the frost line is. And one of the challenges is to say, let's not do what we did for 100 years, which is pay a guy a full-time salary and benefits and everything just to basically be the frost watcher, right? And then now put out sensors, and for the price of the sensors, how many can we deploy to get really hyper accurate results in? And again, what's the main concern always is how do we secure all this nonsense, right? But I think that's, you look at things that we employed vast numbers of people to do 100, 200, 500 years ago, when we were a 3-mile-an-hour society. We went to being a 55-mile-an-hour society, and now we move at 186,000 feet per second, right? And I think that's where history, you draw a line and say, hey, we're not doing this anymore because we have something better to do.
Yeah, right. And I think, well, we've long on this show talked about that really being, at least in my opinion, the point of technology. It should be there to make your life better through, whether you want to call it an enhancement, a force multiplier. There's different ways to imagine it. And I don't think those are the same in all cases, but right. And that has to come from innovation, which I think by definition, I don't know if you guys agree with this. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I'd be interested to know. I think by definition, that is a status quo disruptor, innovation itself.
Well, it's really interesting when you take a look at cultures, other cultures around the world. When you think about process improvement, where this all started with Toyota, they actually look at it in order to not reduce workforce, but to retrain and put people in a position that's going to better further the agenda of the organization. Only here in the United States, when we talk about process improvement, that people start losing jobs, because they're looking to cut the bottom line, and instead of trying to further the upside, they go, okay, I'm going to protect the downside, and I'm just going to get rid of people after I've done process improvement. So naturally, every time someone hears anything about technology improvements, they immediately go right to, that means a loss of jobs.
Because and I think that's because of our focus on the technique as a metric for the productivity, right?
Right. They don't look at it to where I'm now going to retrain someone and reposition them in order to make the upside even bigger. They just immediately go right to, I'm going to lose my job, and now what am I going to do? And that's why I believe here in the United States, many of the populace is hesitant, because that's what it's fear. Japan,
sure.
They don't think that way at all. Germany, they don't think that way. And it's largely because of GM, Ford, Chrysler is the why that happened. They just start laying people off.
But Germany, for example, Germany has a very robust trade school mentality, right? They have everybody, they position people for what they're good at, and they have I don't know, pay and compensation, but lifestyle. Everybody has their place. And it's celebrated for whatever you're good at, and they have a very vibrant trade school culture. I mean, down here in the Virginia Beach, Norfolk area, you have the shipyard, and the shipyard struggles to get people that want to come in and be pipe fitters, welders, and all the ship trades. Why? Because it's blue collar work that largely in America we've demonized over the past 20 years and said, hey, you have to go to school and get this degree and do this and do that. All right, let people find their own level. And I mean, a nuclear welder right now, those guys are making over 100K a year, right? Largely because there's not that many of them, but there's not a pipeline of younger welders coming through, so these guys can demand a premium, right? And I think we're starting to see that now in technology, where Google and all these other folks are like, hey, you don't have to have a college degree. We're going to do what you do in the startup world, right? We take code samples, we look at the production of your work and say, all right, you're smart. Let's bring you in and let's start working together.
Yeah. Well, tell me what you guys think about this. This is something I've been thinking about for a while. And part of this for me revolves around, Dan, you and I have had these conversations around like universal basic income or what alternatives to that might be. And I think the end goal is that we ought to use technology to essentially free ourselves up to do the cool shit that as human beings we're really, really capable of, and that I think most people, not all, but most people want to do. So how about instead of focusing on productivity and aligning our technique metrics to measure that, why don't we start figuring out how to measure creativity, right, at the individual level, and incentivizing that, and incentivizing using the technology to automate the boring stuff. And I don't mean like evaporating trades. I think there's a lot of creativity in trade work potentially, especially around when you're talking about what's the word? I can't think of the fucking word now. Let's say production, fabrication. That's what I was going to say. Fabrication, right? There's opportunities to be creative as a human being there and do things that are novel and innovative. And why not focus on that?
It's an interesting question because this is something that when we looked at this past weekend out at Ross, which was the United States has the fewest amount of entrants into entrepreneurial companies, the fewest amount out of all countries, and it's been steadily on the decline. And what's the reason for that shift? I mean, at one point people were like, hey, and the reason to go to the United States was the land of opportunity, things like this. But now it has the least amount of new businesses that are being created. Do you think that's because of we're becoming less creative here in the United States, or is it? I mean, I don't necessarily go to the education system because every part of the United States' education system is different based on geographic. But it's an interesting way of looking at it. Europe has the highest amount of new entrants per year.
I don't know what you think, TK. I'll give you my personal opinion on it. I think, and you're going to continue to see the erosion of this, and I think it's because of our drastic shift towards left-wing ideology. When you have experienced this kind of social turmoil through political ideology, you can look at this historically. I mean, this has a connection to what we started talking about. When you're diffusing, well, look at it this way. When you privatize gains and socialize losses, what entrepreneur is going to enter that kind of environment? Because the table's already tipped against you. And so you see that erosion of why would I innovate here when I can go innovate over there? And, I'm not demonized as a dirty capitalist pig for it. I mean, I'll just broadly summarize it that way.
I think there's some of that, but I also think as a society, if you look kind of the wave we went on, everybody still remembers 2008, 2009 when, the economy went south for a while, and it stifled some innovation. And early on, like when we met, we were on that upswing where capital was easy to get and companies were just throwing money at any idea, right? And I think as we work into that, there's some of that's at play, but most adults now that are working adults in their 30s and above, they remember 2008, 2009, and a lot of those folks were 21, 22 when that happened, and it took them a long time to get a job. And so I think one of the pure tenets of innovation and entrepreneurial spirit is how risk averse are you, right? And I think when people can steadily remember a time when they couldn't find a job, right, then that innovation goes away. When you go back to the 50s, to draw the historical context, people just came back from a war where in America's eyes we kicked the world's behind, right? Yeah. And there's free countries out there now because we gave up 500,000 of our citizens to defend that. I would say that's kind of short-sighted because we gave up 500,000 of our citizens so we didn't have to fight in the streets of Boston and New York and Chicago to defend our homeland, right? That's part of kind of who we are as Americans. Let's go over there and do it so all the women and children don't have to experience getting their houses bombed, right? But what happened right after that? You had all this manpower that re-entered the workforce. It was at a time where we could now see globally, and we said, we are going to power the world. right? And we made a commitment as a thing. And you had a lot of people, millions of men that came back like, what do you mean I can't do that? We defeated the Germans, we defeated the Japanese. I didn't get killed. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. Then you rolled into this, right? And then when you get into the 60s, late 60s and 70s, when we kind of stagnated again, we'll look at manufacturing. My mom grew up in Pittsburgh, which, huge steel town. And at the time, all my grandma's neighbors, aunts and uncles and all that stuff, they all worked in the steel industry. And I can remember my father arguing with one of the guys about, the union was fighting not to give up 10% of whatever it was to bring robots in there, right? Into the steel. They said, well, nothing. Well, then they went out of business. They didn't go out of business because they didn't give up 10% of money or people or whatever to bring robots in. They went out of business because building steel factories, building capital industries is a once in a lifetime thing. Right? Yeah. So like Japan's out of the steel business now. Korea's almost out of the steel business now, and India is taking over. Why? Because they have the newest, most recently automated factories, and you can really only do that once, even if you have the core resources, right? Because of just the unbelievable expense to do that. And so that's, but we did a bad job of transitioning to something else in some cases, right? And the one thing about being in technology, what we all do is it's zeros and ones. In a lot of ways, you can't see it.
Yeah.
Some of the coolest stuff that's ever out there is designed to work behind the scenes to take care of other people, right? And how, you'll hear, people will say, I don't know how that company made $1 billion. Well, it made $1 billion because it did something really cool that allowed you what? Convenience, right?
Yeah, right.
It didn't allow you convenience. It allowed you secure convenience, right? Which is a lot of what we lack. It's why Dan shows up to work every day. He wants to keep things convenient, but he's got to keep things secure. It's why you train students in, as some of my friends say, in the dark arts, right? Because you want them to be innovative and create great things, but you also want it to be secure so that the world doesn't come crashing down.
Right. Yeah, and it's not always against malevolence. Sometimes it's just through its own sheer complexity and
yeah.
I don't know if you all can see this, but I just shared the screen. But here's the.
Yeah, I can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if I can get this. I don't know how the hell to get this bigger on here. There it is.
Zoom.
Yeah, man. I'm trying to find the button. So there's the stat. So Turkey is like everyone is going into business, for themselves. But the United States, just slightly below. Norway. I wonder if that's because Norway is much more socialized.
Well, it's an interesting thing, and so I don't want to demonize liberalism or even socialism. That's not my point. What's interesting to me in my own argument is that technology is what led to the situation we're in, because technology empowers the individual at the cost of the group. And so and I think that's an interesting thing you said, TK, where as a country, as an identity, we didn't deal well with the shift from industrialization to post-war, what are we next, right? And I don't think as a society, even globally, we're dealing really well with this shift from group tribalism, which is wired into us biologically, group sizes of 100, 150 or less. We operate really well in that context and really shitty outside of it, especially as it goes bigger, to I'm as powerful as what used to be a tribe by myself. I mean, not the army of one concept, but that's actually a really good snapshot of what technology can do for you as an individual. And that produces like a weird mania.
I think, I think when we look at that, I'll use Kosovo as an example. You know why they're very entrepreneurial minded and very innovative? Because they have to be, because there's no core industry there.
Right.
And if you looked along a lot of those countries that are the most innovative, those are countries where standard, and right now, what economically or, from an economic perspective, we're in a period of what's considered to be full employment. Like we have full engagement, from an economic, if you open up an economics book, we have with the unemployment rate we have full economic engagement. And if you do that, you're always going to have the risk takers and the innovators and the dreamers. But most people, like you say, they want to be in that tribe. And that tribe is show up here, leave here, go to basketball practice, go on vacation for 2 weeks a year, and be safe, right? I mean, my parents could not imagine a world where, I would be doing what I'm doing, having been a SEAL, and then now where I like engaging in startups, post startups, and the kind of that building process and growing. I love that, right? And my parents could never imagine that because it wasn't safe, right? And I think now when you have full employment, you allow people to be safe. We were very innovative in the tech space. It started in the late 70s. What was happening in the late 70s? Jimmy Carter was president. Unemployment was double digits. Inflation was at 22%. I remember, like, if you want to buy a car, it was 20+% interest rate, right? And so people were like, hey, I'm willing to take a risk because I have nothing to lose for it. I have nothing to lose, right?
Right.
And on the flip side of that, if you look at how the government, who should have the biggest historical reference library on the planet, it takes 17 years to build an F-35 fighter, right? And that's the new technology. We were building, concept to deployment during World War II of a fighter was less than a year in some cases, and probably 2 or 3 years average, right? Because there was the need to be successful in the immediacy. And so, within it, now we're paralyzed by this bureaucracy that stifles innovation. And then we wonder why there's a Windows 95 machine at the Center for what do they call it? Defense Finance and Accounting Office.
Yeah.
Hey, look at this museum piece. No, don't unplug that. That's essential to us getting business done, right?
Right.
And that, when you look at it, is we don't future-proof well.
Well, do you think that's partly because we're just wired up to not see that far? I mean, it definitely, I think culturally in the West, I would argue that we are. Like, we're very short-term driven.
Well, the people that are not successful are very short-term driven. The more successful people, even though I think Elon Musk is a complete fraud, he still was able to have the courage to say things that he knows in order for Tesla and SpaceX to be successful. It's 10 years away at a minimum. It's a 10-year problem.
Sure.
So, the people that are better at looking as to where the vision needs to be, that's not short term, are the ones that are more successful. I mean, we could say whatever we want, even about President Trump. The man has the foresight to, hey, look, I'm going to use these laws. I'm going to keep going bankrupt. Why? Because when you can essentially sell debt at a cheaper rate than what you can put it on the market, then go ahead. What's the downside? I go bankrupt. All of my debt is essentially forgiven, and I have money in my pocket. That's the more people that can do that, the more successful they are.
Well, that's an example actually of what I was talking about when I was saying that gains are privatized and losses are publicized or socialized.
Right. In other countries, if you start a company and you fail, it's shameful. In the United States, after you failed 3 times, now VCs are looking to give you money because now you're going to get it right.
Well, I'll tell you this: when I'm Supreme Emperor of the United Carolina Territory, it'll be run the exact opposite.
You understand, Dan? He's going to be on your throne, sans clothes, with an orb and a scepter and a crown with a spew, right? What do you think is going to do with olive in his belly button? It'll be completely off-putting, right?
What do you think is going to put him on that throne?
Ugh.
All gains will be socialized and all losses will be privatized.
Supreme Emperor of the Carolina Territory. Nice.
Yeah, the unified.
Unified.
Well, it stands the reason, right? This is my single argument. Everybody around here loves sports. What's the name of the football team? It ain't the North Carolina Panthers. It ain't the South Carolina Panthers. It's the Carolina.
Right. Marketing, my friend. Marketing. I don't want to offend the people from the South, right? but it's like, with the Dakotas, right? There's being up there is pretty funny because they were talking about it's global, climate change and everything, and the governor, who's very analytic, says, okay, so between now and the year 2100, what's the worst case scenario? And they're like, well, if between then and now, we'll increase the temperature of North Dakota, so we're roughly the same as South Dakota, right? And I'm like, so what is that? Half a degree?
Yeah.
An imperceptible thing to me, but
This is why it's going to be very simple. We're going to combine the Carolinas, we're going to combine the Dakotas, and then we're going to add East Canada and West Canada, so that way we don't have to change the stars on the flag.
Hey, that's a great idea. I have no problem establishing trade routes.
Well, so we're not worried about embroidery.
There's going to be East Canada and West Canada, which is going to add 2. But we combine the Dakotas and the Carolinas, still have 50 stars. Bam.
So we got Betsy Ross out here. We can't automate the whole flag making process. I mean, come on,
having done work in the government for so long, I know that process might take 50 years before that can get done. So I'm just streamlining the process.
Look at you, thinker, big helmet on you this morning. Good job.
Oh man. So I don't know, man. I've been thinking more about. And we've actually been talking about this. This is what clued me into the idea of, if I'm trying to imagine, like I was talking to somebody at High Point the other day, and I said, well, for me, starting in the fall, the first student that I start with as a freshman, because I'm teaching an intro class, they'll probably graduate, let's say, in 2025. And so what do I want that person to be able to be in the world in 2025? And so that's a really complex question, because it's not only me and my evolution as a human being, that person's evolution starting from where they're at, let's say 18 or 19, and what in the hell the world's going to be like in 2025. Well, that's a lot of moving pucks, man.
The world is at the higher end. Take a look at just that small geographical area and the other influences that could be involved there. That person's friends.
Sure.
How other professors may treat that individual, and where you have to either do more or stay status quo in order to help that individual reach whatever their fullest potential might be in that time period. And then the world at large. So there's a lot of factors.
Yeah, and so the person I was talking to appropriately said, well, I mean, a lot of that presupposes that you can have a crystal ball and see the future. Well said. However, here's my retort. And
we know my predictions come true. So
so tell me what you think about this, because TK actually said it in the context of industrialization and ramping up for the future post-war and all that jazz, right? This is what my retort was. I think this is a good insight. Tell me what you think. I think the trick isn't to try and imagine what the future might be and all those possibilities and then start trading maps and whatever, right? I think the secret and the real value comes from understanding the past and what happened based on the environmental selective pressures, right? So, I mean, if I need to fight a tiger and win, I'm going to starve myself for a week first, because then I got to fucking kill this tiger, right? Or Sun Tzu, if you really want to win, put your back against the river and burn your boats.
Well, that's what, more than one explorer, has gotten to the shores of a country and burned their boats so that their crew is motivated to, there's no way to go back. Right.
Right.
This concept that you have to put yourself into some horrific position to be successful. I have moderate experience, physically torturing myself to do that. Right. But in a lot of cases, that initial pain and suffering that you feel is to give you a benchmark for, hey, when it gets tough later on, I can really be successful, right? I think when you start talking, what do you want a student to be 4 years from this coming year, right, or 5? It's what we have an all or nothing kind of mentality in a lot of ways, right? That if you get an undergrad engineering student, there's so many engineering classes that they have to take and be good and competent at, that in a lot of times the social sciences and the things that give them depth and perspective, and if I'm going to go out and invent the next great thing because that's what I'm planning on doing, because that's what I'm learning in school, what's the historical concept with that? I mean, both of you guys have heard me say this. Usually when I'm not happy at work is, why are we doing this? We're not doing it this way. Why? Because I've got a big long laundry list from life's experience here's things I'm not going to do, right? Under no circumstance will I do X, Y, and Z. What it does is it frees me up to accept new ideas and look at things completely different. You know why? Because I've kicked myself in the junk enough doing these things that I'm tired of it, right? And that, but
so how many times do you have to kick yourself there in order to realize it doesn't feel good? Because for me,
more than once, because I'm apparently not that smart, right? But if you like, Jason, you're a good blend of you have an undergrad humanities degree, and then you got into technology. And so I think the folks that, and I'm not saying this, I was an electrical engineering major when I first started out. Absolutely hated it because I did it because my parents wanted me to do it, right? But the people that changed my life and perspective about learning and wanting to, be knowledgeable about anything, they were all English teachers, right? Harry Mitchell in high school and a guy, Dr. Bill Coughlin in college, right? I wrote my first paper in, English 101 in college, and he's like, hey, I know you guys are all engineers, but try to focus on this class like you focus on every other class for at least half an hour a week, and you'll be successful. First class, I'm in there, I write the first paper. Dan, I'll tell you how long ago it was. We all had to do it on mimeograph paper so he could pass it around. And at the end of class, if you want to make fun of my age now, but he would have another student read your paper as written, and it was run-on sentences, no punctuation, capital at the beginning, period at the end of the paper, and just exhale the whole way along, right?
Yeah.
About halfway through, what's that, Dan?
I'm still shocked this wasn't a chisel.
No, we were wringing it out on the burning press back then, right? But it's funny to listen to somebody else read your stuff, right? Because what I was trying to do is I was trying to rush through it to get back to something I really needed to study on that I thought was important. Right? Well, what do I do now? I write and I talk, and as a leader, how you articulate yourself in the written and spoken word is in most cases more important than whatever basic understanding of, in this case, technology or anything else you have. And so when you say, what do you want somebody to be 4 or 5 years from now? I would think that the SAT answer of picking from 4 things is well-rounded.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Sure,
because now they're able to, especially if they're computer science or, cybersecurity, as we're saying today, what do I want them to think about when they graduate? And I can't, and again, we to go back to the entrepreneurial thing is, am I thinking about making $1 million or $1 billion, or am I thinking about changing the world? And how do I come to the grips where I'm going to change the world? Am I doing it because I want to show other people I'm mad at my parents, an ex-girlfriend in college, am I angry at that? Or am I doing it because my eyes have been opened to a certain extent from the humanities? I think like University of Chicago does this really well. When you go there, you don't pick the major. The first 2 years they expose you to everything, give you a great core foundation of being loving the journey of learning. Right? That's why my children have gone to the high school they go to. It's very demanding as far as teaching you the kind of the mechanism of learning, how to write a science paper, how to annotate your work, how to do an MLA format on an English paper. But more importantly, because they don't introduce standardized testing and things, and they make you take a wide variety of subjects, that you get a love for learning, right? And whether you graduate and you go to community college or you go to Harvard or a trade school or something in between, being inquisitive is what you want people to be when they get out of the formal learning experience, whatever that is, because then you create lifelong learners, and that's what makes a society great. Is when everybody else they're not on the hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And when they are on the hamster wheel, they're thinking about getting off and going to pick up a book or go to learn something new.
Yep. Hey, my friends, I got to take off. It's good seeing you all. I've got a long drive ahead of me, so hopefully Danny won't kill us.
Pay your insurance and make me the beneficiary. That's all I got to say.
Yeah. All right, guys. Take care.
Later. I'm good to keep talking for a few minutes if you are.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm all good.
Well, I think that's a really interesting perspective, man, because the best I can reason it. I'm a fan of that kind of structure as well. And here's why. First of all, we know cognitively, just like physiologically, most human beings in that age range aren't fully developed yet, right? You got to get into your early 20s until you really have a sense of self, capital S self, right? And so I think by introducing a broad liberal arts structure in the beginning and not forcing people into this trap of day one, you have to pick what you're going to be in 5 years. Right. And that's
Right.
I mean, that's hard for me to figure out. I would assume it is somewhat for you too, right?
Yeah, it's the old adage. Well, I still don't know. When I grow up, I still don't know what I'm going to be, right?
Yeah, right.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, and it actually causes me a bit of existential angst, which I've learned to enjoy because it's just part of this reinvention process, right?
Right. It's growth, right? When you get on, discomfort fuels growth.
Yeah, exactly. And so for these like 18, 19-year-olds, I think it's good you have to extract yourself from your cultural normative situation and learn how to orient yourself in the world as it's growing and figure out where your creativity is, because my creativity isn't yours. You and I have common enough creativity that we can bond and do things in common.
Right.
But there's lots of people that my wife and I are great examples. How she's creative is completely different than me. And we don't have anything in common in that part of our lives, right?
But I think that's great because it's like the drawing where you've got two circles and they overlap. Here's what I think is really cool. Here's what I think is really cool. Here's what we think is really cool. Right? That's friends, that's spouses, that's it's all of those things, right? And the more people you get in your tribe, right, there's going to be common overlap, and you have to learn to celebrate the differences. And I think socially today we don't celebrate the differences, right? As much as we used to, or as much as we should have. Right.
I agree.
And but when you say right now, education is very hard, especially college education, because of the expense. Right. When I went to school, it was $6,000 a year, or a year all in. That's books, room and board, the whole 9 yards. It allowed you to get to a point where I really hate what I'm doing. This is going to take me an extra semester, but I'll do it because it's where I want to go. And you find yourself, right?
Right.
And you go to a private school today, you're talking sometimes $75,000. That's just tuition, right? You're committing, you're committing the better part of $300,000-$400,000 to get an education. You can't, and a lot of times parents say, hey, you can't afford to make a mistake. And you're asking a 17-year-old that's not fully formed. And there are these people, right? You and I both know them. They woke up when they were 5 and like, I'm going to be a doctor, and they're a doctor, right? But for the most part, for the rest of us, like one of these days, I'm going to figure out what I want to do, right? Yeah. And I think today, when you look at like Coursera, Udemy, and all these things where you can go and go, hey, I don't know about cognitive brain theory, but you know what? I think it's going to be really important in technology in 5 years. And if I want to be considered a thought leader on this, I might want to learn about it. And for $20, I can go take a course on CBT, right? Or whatever it is, right? And it's moving to say, I want to learn, but how do we get people to want to do that, right? And not demonize people for the choices they make.
Right. Exactly.
I think now, and private schools are the worst at this. Every year when the kids graduate, they put up a big list of where they went to college, right?
Yeah.
It's Notre Dame, it's Harvard, it's the University of North Carolina, it's Virginia Tech, right? You know what they don't put? Pick a community college.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Because
right.
that doesn't get parents. We have what's that big thing with all the celebrities paying lots of money to finesse the system to get their kids into school, right? What does your kid want to do? Right? Jared. And when Jared graduated high school, he's like, I have no idea what I want to do. Right.
Yeah.
So now, he's like, Dad, I just want to go to community college for 2 years. I'm like, what's your plan after that? And he had a thing. He's off in Virginia Commonwealth now. He's kicking it. I'm extremely proud of him because he figured this out for himself. He has a love of what he's doing. He knows what he wants to do when he gets out, and he's executing a plan. Right? He's going to be more well prepared for having done that journey on his own and having to figure it out than if I went to Virginia or Georgetown and said, hey, here's a big bucket of money, put my name on the side of a building, and send my son gets to go here because of that. Right?
Yeah. Let me add something, because this is something people miss too. So like where we lived in Southern California, where my stepson is right now. Okay. And I know a lot of this because I taught it at a Cal State, Cal Poly Pomona, and I had interviewed extensively at the community college where he's at. And do you know the only difference between those two schools? One's 2-year and one's 4-year. They had the same student population. You're talking 30, 40,000 students at a community college.
Right.
It's not a community college as like you and I know it. You know what I mean?
No, that's why I'm here. Is like we have Tidewater Community College in the Virginia higher education system. That now, if you got, I think it's Tidewater, and then there's Piedmont, which is up by Charlottesville, and then Nova, which is in Northern Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
If you get a 2-year degree with a certain grade point, based on your grade point average, when you apply to go to school, you're not really applying. You're filling out a form that says, "Hey, here's my grade," because now you've proven academic success. I mean, that's the rigors of the entrance process for undergrad, is to try to ascertain whether you're going to either help or hurt their graduation rate.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's how it is in California, and that's why I think most people gravitate towards something like that's Fullerton College I was talking about.
Yeah.
Or any of the community schools, because they have their own little system. Because as long as you perform at let's say an average level, it's a guaranteed transfer to any Cal State.
Right. It's like, I think with the exception of like your University of Virginia, if you're a 3.0 student or better, you automatically, Jared wanted to go to Virginia Commonwealth. He had like a 3 something, and it was, fill the paper and, welcome, and I think UVA is the only one where you have to have like a 3.5.
Yeah.
Right?
I think they those kinds of schools perform a critical function, but they get looked down on. Even within the academic community, they're kind of like, oh, that's a 2-year school. You know what I mean?
Right.
And it's like, well, wait a minute. That not only it's proven to ease the transition between high school and 4-year for most people, because it's not as cognitively demanding as a 4-year. It's cheaper by
orders of magnitude cheaper.
Yeah. And it allows that person, as they develop, to extract themselves from what that status quo tribal group was and figure out how they orient in the world. And you know what? Maybe you do your 2 years, you get your associates, and you're like, dude, I can go get a job making money, and I can be productive, and I can be creative the way I want to be, and I don't need the other 2 years.
Right.
Perfect.
Well, it's funny. There's one of the, I think public education, we've talked about this before. They do 2 things very well. They do special needs. And Virginia Beach lives this way. They do special needs, and they do it incredibly well. And then they do gifted programs incredibly well, right? The 75, 80% in the middle, they have to be very proactive to get the most from the system, right?
Yeah.
The system feeds those 2 groups. The other ones have to go out and forage, metaphorically, to get what they want out of it, right?
Right.
And they have, with the academy system here, they have a STEM academy. And those, based on the average person that graduates that, because they spend a lot of their time at the community college, which literally is across the street from this high school, and they're getting Cisco certs. They're doing this. They're effectively leaving high school with an associate's as well.
Yeah, right.
Same with the business and entrepreneurial academy. They're getting a high school diploma and associates roughly at the same time. And now that 4-year education, higher education is undergrad, and then blending some, post-grad stuff in there, right? And so I think that's an effect. Or a lot of these guys, they'll get out and they're like, hey, I'm going to go to work, all right? And they'll be a server admin. They'll do these things. They'll get that entry level. What I think, those are the blue collar jobs in my mind of the 21st century: server admin, running cable, network administration, and they pay okay. Like, it's a great entry level job. I pay around here. It's a little bit lower because we have just an amazing amount of just population of people that are smart on this. But you can make 40 grand a year as an 18-year-old, right? And then go to school, and however you want to do it. And I think it gives a lot of flexibility. I think that's the key in the 21st century, is flexibility.
Yeah,
you need a degree if you want to be a doctor or a lawyer, right? And even in Virginia, you can read the law. Right, there's a law firm here where you can go sit down for 3 years, like Lincoln did, read the law, and pass the bar exam. Right, it's the whole reason the bar exists, because that's
right.
You had to prove competency back, before the law schools were industries, right? And I think that's a great, practical education. I think in a lot of ways the community college system provides you a practical education, and B, a common sense approach to, I don't know what I want to do, so let me start on the road. Let me go learn.
Right. Yeah.
That's where we're at.
And I think the idea of the liberal arts originally is to create what I conceptualize as almost like a social learning bootloader, right?
Yeah.
And it's just to get you to a level so that from there forward, you're able to take things in, process it, and then output. That's really, I think, the point of it, and I think it's super important. Super important.
I think with engineers and the hard sciences, especially at the undergrad level, they devalue the social sciences because it's just, you're not going to take it to get an electrical engineering degree. And I'm speaking at the University of Mass, where I'm in, you've got to take 20, 24 credits some semesters with labs and everything else just to get through there. And it's a 4.5 year program.
Yeah.
And I mean, and kids are slap wore out by the time they get done.
Right. Right.
Like my dad said to me, he goes, I don't care what you major in. And he goes, but you will minor in English because the written and spoken word is never going to go out of style. And he was a software developer for General Electric and had hundreds of software developers work for him. And he's like, I got all these engineers and all these smart people. About 4 of them can actually write down what they're doing in a competent format and explain it to the world. He goes, and being able to explain things isn't explaining it to people that get it like you do, not like-minded people. It's being able to tell the world what you're doing and why, and make them understand it.
That's right.
Well, Einstein theory. If you can't explain it to a kindergartner, you don't know it well enough.
That's right.
You don't know it well enough. You just can't articulate it because you weren't given the tools earlier on.
Yeah.
I have a great story about like my love of English and why. Sometimes you just have to find the right person, right? Because while my dad said that, my mom said that about learning English, and they were more concerned about every grade I got in science and math classes when I was in high school. And I took all of them. Right. And junior year, I go into English class and I'm just hanging on. I'm just like doing what I got to do. Okay, I got to do it. Boom, I get an A, I move on. But I wasn't being creative. I wasn't being thoughtful. And I wasn't absorbing and enriching myself by saying, hey, and gaining historical perspective. Right. And I think that's the other thing that we forget. Like what historical perspective am I gaining by reading books? Right.
Mm-hmm.
For example. So I go into class and I'd always heard of this guy, Mr. Mitchell, Harry Mitchell. And it was a mountain of a man. He was about 6'3", 6'4", probably weighed about 350 if he weighed an ounce. And he had been a drill instructor in the Marine Corps in World War II.
Oh.
He had a big barrel-chested dude, and he was an elegant gentleman.
Sure, I get it.
And we would sit in class, and he had this rakishly deep voice and very elegantly spoken all the time. Always had a jacket, like a houndstooth jacket on and a tie and everything like that. And would never call us by our first names. It was always Mr. Epley, and so I'm sitting next to this, and I, 30 plus years now, I still remember this girl, Donna LeBlanc. She was a friend of mine from high school and all that. And I'm talking to her before class, and he would never tell us to be quiet. Right at the beginning of class, I'm sitting and I'm talking to her. He's like, Mr. Epley, and I'm like, yes. And he's like, do you find Miss LeBlanc to be attractive? And you're like, yes. He goes, well, does Mr. Del Giudice know about that? Because I know they're engaging in some sort of relationship. And he would go on, and it was, you weren't just learning about English, you were learning about interpersonal relationships.
Right. That's right.
So years later, I'm out of college just before I joined the Navy, and you're starting to go out at night to bars and stuff. And Harry, like I said, he was a big man, and he's in his 60s, probably retired from school now, and you would see him out every week with some different elegant older lady, and he would always introduce them and talk about them like they're the only person on earth, and it's like there's a light shining on them. Right?
Yeah.
Came out with another chick, right?
Yeah.
But he would introduce you. And everybody else was important, and there was always historical context, and he would reference books while he talked about people. He's like the character in this. Mm-hmm. That right there set me on a path to where I read a lot right now, and I guarantee you it's because of that guy, right? And that's
sure, yeah.
That's where it's probably one of the reasons why you're an educator, because if you like you said, you're going to get kids when they're 17, 18 years old. What are you going to do to change their life? Right. And it's
exactly
perspective. And you try to do that as a parent.
Yeah. Well, I was a few of us at High Point were having a conversation the other day about why we chose to be professors. And I expressed the opinion, well, I feel fortunate because somehow I've been able to trick society into paying me to continue to be a student instead of me continuing to pay society to be a student. And all I got to do is talk about what I find interesting.
Yeah.
And get people excited about it. Well, shit, I like that.
Home run.
I don't think it's easy, but I like that. You know what I mean?
life's not supposed to be easy. You're supposed to find something that's difficult that you enjoy the journey.
Yeah, right.
Right. But and I think people do that, and me as well. I mean, I think society, very few people start doing something and saying, "Hey, I can do this one thing for the rest of my life because it's difficult. It's enriching to my soul. Excuse me. It's enriching to my soul. I provide something else for humanity, and there's not an end point, right? I mean, that's
right.
That's the problem. Someone's job is like, hey, I have this job, like I'm not growing anymore. You hear that a lot, right? I got to go do something else because I'm not growing. A lot of people, move around quite a bit, right? Every 2 or 3 years, 25, 30 years ago, it was on, people stayed at the same job for, my dad started at General Electric, I think in 1958, 56. And then in 1989, he retired.
Yeah.
Right. And stayed there his whole career. And he was cradle to grave, right? Everybody, you started there, you finished there, had a great retirement. People now blame it on benefits and stuff for driving the change that, companies don't care. If we go back into history, in 1954, Congress enacted wage and price controls. And so these big businesses, especially ones that do business with the government, had to find a way to be competitive. So they started offering health insurance as a way, and benefits as a way to say, we can't give you any more money, but we can reduce your, we're offsetting a lot of this so you have more in your pocket, right?
Right.
Well, the government's like, well, we don't have to do anything. Well, look at these companies. They're taking care of everybody. So a very small population was without healthcare, and we had a mechanism to drive that. And we can argue whether it was what the quality of that was, but we were thinking that way. That paradigm shifted, and then people became more restless because we were a different society, right? That concept of, I can't raise my kids the way I was raised because they don't live in the world I grew up in.
Right.
Right. And that's, even in my age group, we were rule followers. Like, you went to school, if you did something adverse in school, it was your problem. When you got home, you had to deal with your parents, and they didn't go in and, I had a friend of mine, she quit teaching school. She's a federal agent now. She quits teaching school because she just couldn't take the parents coming in. Hey, why'd you give my kid a D? I didn't give him a D, he earned it.
Yeah.
Right? He did everything he could to get a D. Right. And it's just the displacing of accountability. I was going to say blame, but I think accountability is the bar. What's the education system supposed to do? It's making you accountable to somebody else besides yourself and your parents.
Right.
And preparing you for the planet along the way.
That's right.
Right. And that's what I think. And it's a hard paradigm we live in now, because not only do we have, we trying to raise kids and send the next generation off to be better than we were, right? That's what our parents wanted. That's what I want for my kids. And hopefully my kids are going to want that for their kids.
Right.
Right. We should be on a trajectory or a glide slope of greatness. And yeah, there's going to be bumps along the road, and, not every kid's going to be king, and not every child's going to be a pauper. And we try to, the problem is, I think sometimes we try to limit the maxes and mins.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, instead of trying to create a hard bottom, right? We think we have to create a hard bottom at the expense of the top, and I don't think we do.
I would agree. I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
No, not at all.
And I think it's actually much more natural to just let things be. Like, I was talking to a friend Dan and I have yesterday on the phone, and he just had a kid, and I think his kid's like 6 months old now. And we were just talking about being fathers and stuff like that. And I said, look, man, take it for its worth. But for me, I started to figure out that the trick wasn't to try and intervene and set up all these boundaries and all these conditions, and because it'll drive you crazy. And plus, you're so sleep deprived in the first couple of years, it ain't going to work anyway.
Right.
So I started to figure out, partly for my own sanity, but I also noticed what I perceived anecdotally to be a developmental difference. Just let it be, man. Provide a very broad framework, a safety net, if you will, and let that thing be what it's going to be within that broad framework. And, that's how I think about undergraduate education. It's exactly what you said, man. Let's take a little bit of time. Let's say the first 2 years. So that's the equivalent of a 2-year school, or the first 2 years in a 4-year, and give you a broad sample of what really the world is as we know it, and how it's been for the recorded history. And now at least you can embody yourself in that and figure out, how am I going to be creative? How am I going to contribute? Maybe this ain't for me. Maybe I need to go be a mechanic, because that's really where I think where I'm viable.
Right.
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing too, is sometimes this is the weird thing I was talking about with my ideology comment is technology empowers the individual to be gods. I mean, we can be anything we want at any given time.
Yeah, just
right?
with a little watch on your wrist, right? The technology
Yeah.
that exists in that is exponentially more technology than was in the moonshot.
Yeah, hell yeah.
That whole thing, right?
Right. And so you can quite literally, in a lot of ways, become whatever you want in a very short amount of time. Right.
Right.
And yet we don't really understand how to wield that power quite well yet. And we think that the individual has to be at the expense of the group. When I've started to think that I think part of the curation that has to be developed now for all this information that we're generating is the ability to rapidly move between social groups or tribes, right?
Right.
You don't have to belong to a tribe, but that doesn't mean tribes shouldn't exist. I think they always will because they're just wired into us.
Right. I think, both we're wired as human beings, and some people are not, to be takers and givers, right? That when I'm hurting, I want somebody to help lift me up. And when I'm not hurting, it should be incumbent upon me that I'm going to reach out my hand. And I think that's, and you've heard me say this before, there's two types of people lately in the world, net givers and net takers, right? And especially when it comes to employment things, I can't, like, net takers just wear me out. It siphons so much of my day, from a business perspective, it can siphon so much of your day that you're like, wait a second, where are all the people that are really killing it, doing a great job?
Yeah.
Right? That's more importantly, in education, right? It's why class sizes, I think, especially in younger grades, is hugely important, because if you have one or two students that are over there doing their own thing and distracting everybody, now the rest of the class, doesn't. It's the old physics thing, right? I push something down the hill. That force vector has so much energy, it can go traverse so far. If I start doing things to make that energy go sideways and create force vectors that aren't parallel in the same direction to that, I don't go as far. My forward throw isn't as much every day. And in education, that's what it is. The teacher walks in all excited. We're going here today. Well, the other day, we only got here. Well, why did we do that? Well, because Johnny and Susie and Bobby, they were over there playing two-handed grab ass, as I used to say when we were kids.
Yeah.
And they were distracting to the rest of the group, right? And there's one Robin Williams, there's one of those guys. Everybody else needs to basically to a certain extent have a little bit of discipline, right? And that's part of the education system as well. It's like, hey, everybody can do what they enjoy doing. It's the people that do the things well that they don't really enjoy doing, they're the ones that are hugely successful in life. And again, that's part of the education system. It's not always, and I think today, because we've tied federal funding to student success rather than tying federal funding to educator competence, right? That now we're so intrinsically driven to get that test result so the federal funding shows up, right? And I think every state has some version of this standardized testing. That when you do that, now you're teaching kids how to take a test, and the teachers have to teach the test to a certain extent, or teach the parameters of how the test functions, and it takes away from the wonderment of learning.
Yeah. Well, right? And you're robbing other human beings of their own potential.
Right. I mean, look, and I don't know the exact statistics on this, but most of your investment bankers, like the kids that they go to the Ivies and they run right to the investment banks, they're history majors, they're philosophy majors, they're English majors, because they look at the expanse of time.
Yeah.
And that allows them, you go give them, then you send them off and they get an MBA. Now they understand the expanse of time, and now they understand the mechanism of the business they're entering.
That's right. I would agree with that.
I think that's, I think we look at that, right? Yes, you want to be an engineer, there's a long kick in the pants you're going to have to become competent at that. But for most people, valuing a broad framed education and not saying, hey, I'm just really good at this. Like Jared loved history, took honors history and everything like that. My little one has the same history teacher. She could care less about history. And it becomes a point of angst with her and the teacher, because the teacher just wants her to love history as much as she loves it. I said, hey, you don't have to love it. You just have to do it. And you have to appreciate it. And and this said, trust me, because there's things I did when I was 14, 15, that I'm like, man, I really should have paid attention to that. But at the time, it didn't interest me. And, that framework of being allowed to go, I really don't like this right now, But guess what? She's taking another history class, probably with the same teacher next year, right? Because it's not like she's required. She's got the one, but she's like, hey, okay, I'll do this.
Yeah, sure.
Right. And
I agree, man.
Kids to take AP classes and stuff like that. Stretch your legs a little bit.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Challenge yourself. Well, and I think part of realizing your own potential is being sometimes unequally presented with opportunities for success and opportunities for failure. Right. And you need a good dose of both. And like, I tend to be driven by what is my personal tax philosophy. I want to be at zero. I want to give as much as I'm supposed to, and I don't want any back, because that means you took too much.
Right.
I don't want to owe, because that means you took too little.
I don't want to be loaning the federal government cash every year, right?
Right. I have zero issue with the concept of taxation. I have zero issue participating as a citizen in that system. I just want it to be at zero, because I want it to be correct, and I want it to be fair and balanced, right?
Have you seen this thing out there lately where it's a picture of a bunch of congressmen sitting there, and there's a group out there wanting, and it shows up on social media, probably part of the worst of what social media can be, where the mob is like, they want to get a petition to have congressmen make $15 an hour, like make the minimum wage. Like, you want to live with whatever the minimum wage is, you're going to make the minimum wage. And I just, rather than wanting to get into this, like, I always say, like, on social media, don't at me, because like, that's silly talk, right? There's 600,000 people in the congressional district, roughly. And I think it's 7, I could go do it, but it's around 700-800 grand a year for a congressional district for paying the congressman, the staff, offices and stuff like that, right? Plus or minus. You're less than $1.50. Right. Every citizen for $1.50, you can bitch every minute of the day about things. And most of you are doing it for free because you don't vote.
Right.
Right. And so, but it's not the congressman, it's what they do while they're there that's expensive.
Right? Yeah, right.
Be involved in the system. Go get, but what do we do? Are we educating kids to look at that? No, we're educating kids to get pitchforks out and take to the streets because there's some imperceptible wrong that they've been done by these guys. Or we're like, no, we've elected them.
Yeah.
There's a mechanism to fix it. If you don't like it, there's a mechanism to fix it.
Now, yeah, this is why literature is important. Just take that classic line of that classic poem, "Rage at the dying of the light." The focus of that is not on the rage part. It's on the dying of the light part.
Exactly. Right. And you're over there with your back face to the problem, screaming at the guys. It's like, guys, come on, let's stop hurting yourselves. Right. But it's that mob mentality with that. And, again, it's like sometimes just the unpreparedness of our elected officials now to be elected, right? To be stewards of society, right? Is we'll say, oh, they're, our leaders. They're not our leaders. They work for us, right? We elected them. Like, we can, 2 years later, boom, get out, right? But we tend not to do that. And the system, I think, now shepherds itself towards, long-term reelection. But it's, when the CEO of Google gets up there, and there's a middle-aged congressman or senator, right? The worst of what we have for technology knowledgeable folks, and says, "Hey, is my data on this iPhone secure? Yes or no?" Like, he's like, yes or no. And the CEO of Google's like, it's not a yes or no, yes or no, because he wants a soundbite, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I don't know how your phone's set up. Yeah, but yes or no, right? And
yeah, right.
When you have, just by virtue of age, right, you have a considerable amount of senators in particular that have never written or received an email on a device on their own, right? Yeah. They're handed it, they're shown the phone, and with the political climate and people, FOI, freedom of information requests and stuff, I understand why. But you have to understand this, right? You have to understand that this internet thing is going to catch on.
Right. Well, that's the point, right? I respect the decision to choose to not use it, but in making that choice, that presupposes that you understand it enough to make the choice for a particular reason.
Well, I don't know if you remember this or not. When we were at Silent Circle and the Black Phone first came out, we paid for a big advertising campaign on the Hannity show on Fox, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the reason behind it was that LifeLock went from being this mom and pop company to this big leviathan of protection, solely based on the fact that Hannity every night would be like, use LifeLock. I use LifeLock. We use LifeLock because you're being paid to do it and it's free to you, right?
Right.
and it's a good product. I'm not harsh harassing the product, but it's literally how it was great, effective marketing and advertising.
Sure.
So we said, hey, we're going to do the same thing. Well, the age of that audience and the demographic, besides the age, led us to a big problem. People were calling up left, right, and center wanting black phones, and we're like, go online and order them. Right? And that's customer service was like, well, just go to the website. I'll give you the website. And one of the guys, I'm walking past customer service, and Maria comes up. She's like, TK, can you talk to this guy? I go, what's going on? She's like, I don't understand what he wants. I'm like, what makes you think I'm going to understand it? She's like, no, you have to listen. I'm like, hey, sir, how you doing? He's like, Hannity told me to buy a black phone, so I want to buy a black phone. Okay, what smartphone are you currently using? He had some, Jitterbug or some flip phone, right? Like, at the time, the black phone 1 was a hard phone to use. Like you had to really want to use it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And he goes, I said, well, log on to blackphone.ch and do this stuff. He's like, I don't believe in the internet. And that's what he said to her, and that's when I was paralyzed. I was like,
what?
I'm like, do you not believe in using the internet because you think it's insecure? Which I get that. Or do you believe that there isn't a thing called the internet?
Yeah, right.
And he's like, oh no, I believe that it's insecure, and I'd rather send you a check. And I'm like, I don't even know how we'd accept. Like, what do we do with a check, right?
Yeah, right.
In order to be secure in your accepting of payments, we had a third-party vendor.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we held them accountable for that stuff. And we didn't even see it. We firewalled it off. It went over there, and they came back and said, hey, they paid, send them a phone, give them a license, do whatever. Right.
That's right.
So that was a whole group of people that we totally targeted the wrong audience, because these folks would buy anything they were told to buy from him. And we were shipping phones, and we got really good at accepting returns. Right. And not because the phone wasn't what we said it wasn't. It wasn't what they needed.
Yeah, exactly. Well said.
And that's in society, we look across a broad array, and, government at its very best can be somewhat perceptive in keeping us from hurting ourselves too badly, keep the road paved and do that. And we're not doing infrastructure really well, because where's all the money coming from? Right.
Right.
But at its very worst, it's heavy handed. And it says we have a cookie cutter for 300 plus million people, right? And that's where you just want to like spin your head around a couple of times and be like, what? And I'm in DC all the time, and you go out and eat, you're at bars or whatever, and you just hear people talking, and sometimes you're just like, okay, please, like, is there a way we can stop you from procreating? Right? Because whatever you're gonna do is not, and you don't have to agree with my opinion, and I don't have to agree with yours, but at least you have to sound like it's well formed.
Yeah, right.
And usually it's pitchforks, and it's usually on either side, right? And people are out there, they're burning somebody in effigy, and they want to go stab somebody else that doesn't agree with them, right? And it's crazy to me. I'll tell you, Corey, I was at I'm not going to say the bar in DC because I don't want to offend anybody by the people that go there, but I showed up and I'm sitting there. It was in the afternoon. I'm getting ready to get on the train, so I'm grabbing a burger or something before I get on the train. And there's a couple sitting there, and they were on a date at like 4 or 5 in the afternoon, and all they were talking about was coding. And the guy and a girl, and they were having the best time ever. And I was like, look at those folks. Everybody thinks they're out should be talking about sports or anything like that. No, he and she found something that they had in common. Mm-hmm. And they were going over command line stuff, and they were like, no, but if you do this and then you put these modifiers on the back end, then you'll get those. And she was like, oh man, I didn't even think of that. And they were just having this great, I was like, you're my 2 favorite people in DC, because everybody else is so concerned with what I call the finiteness of power. If I have it, you don't, I win.
Yeah, right.
That's drives a lot of the really bad behavior in DC. That these people were in their own little bubble. They were, they're holding hands while they're doing it, which I thought was the best.
That's classic. Yeah.
It was like, and I don't have to like, was I personally interested? Yeah, because I was like, okay, he's on the right track. She's on the right track. I'm kind of listening to what they're doing with a code perspective, but they're holding hands. They're having a drink. And they're talking about the things that make them happy. And they're not, it's not saying, I love this candidate or I love this policy, and anybody that disagrees with me, I want them to get run over in traffic this afternoon, which is a lot of what goes on in DC.
Yeah, sure. Right. I mean, they were in a place for themselves as individuals and as a couple, as a group, right? As a dual member tribe,
Right.
whereby they weren't focused on the rage. They were focused on trying to conceptualize the dying of the light, so to speak. Yeah.
Right.
And that's a beautiful thing, man. That's
Oh yeah, no, I
thing.
walked out. I was like, my day was better because of it, right? Because if nothing else, you walk into a bar, there's sports on TV. Everybody wants to argue about sports, and if I've got a Boston hat on, you might as well put a target on me for half the people, right? And I'm like, guys, I don't really care what you think. I like these guys. I grew up with them, and suck it if you don't like it, right? It's like, guess what? I'm gonna go. I'm gonna get on a train. I'm gonna go home, and I don't know your name, and I'm gonna forget about you 3 minutes after I walk out of here. I'm not doing it to be rude. It's just the level of contact that we have. You're not giving me your card. We're not going to be friends, and you're not going to call me and abuse me about sports scores an hour from now. But these folks, there was a bubble around them, and they were romantic, and they were everything else, and they just happened to be talking about coding. Right? I thought that was that's the best part of my day today.
Well, and I think that speaks to just how powerful those moments in space and time are.
Yeah.
And just how human that connection can be, right? And I'm assuming you didn't interact with them, you just observed them, right?
I was just sitting there listening. I was like, I had no business. Like, hey, by the way, no, I don't. No, I think it should be TAC. I should think it should be TAC-X space TAC. No, because that would be the level of conversation, right? And And I mean, they're over there like leaning into each other, holding hands and everything. And that would have been kind of creepy. Hey, by the way, put my head between the two of theirs and go, might want to take a note because I think that was wrong. What you say, no, it's just like, it's watching the human condition, right? I'm one of those guys that can go sit at a mall or sit at the, and I mean the mall in DC, right? The outdoor mall.
Yeah.
And some of the things I've done in the past led me to sit there and be observational. It's that, that's part of the great. When you look at the other side, you see somebody walking around and you can see their body language and their angst, and they're like, I hope everything's all right with that person.
Yeah, right.
It's like, what was it? Kate Spade, up until the day before she kills me, man, she was hot-beat planning for the future and everything like that, And how do people plan for the future while they're planning on while existing in them this great desire to not be on the earth anymore? Right. I mean, that's think of go talk about going to take your course in cognitive brain theory or something else. It's like, I got to go figure this out. Right. Because you see people all the time, and the bigger the city and the less personal things are, the harder it is to perceive sometimes. But because everybody puts their head down and they go from A to B, because how many people can I interact with in a day before it makes me crazy? Right. But like I said, I could watch the human condition all day long.
Hell yeah, man. I agree. So, well, I mean, I think that's part of what attracts us to the things we do,
Right. But, it's like, and I love being in meetings, and I love watching people jockey for position, who's going to be in charge. And it's like the first person to go from sitting, in a relaxed thing to leaning into the meeting, that's the person that wants to be in charge.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, right.
It's not always the person you think it is. You're like, hey, look at that little weirdo come out of the corner, just over there minding their own business, and all of a sudden, boom, they're like, no, I'm going to be thinking. I think for a large measure, the more mature you get, and I don't mean age-wise, but I mean emotionally mature, the more that doesn't offend you. It shouldn't offend you, right? Because everybody's trying to find their place in the world. And go ahead and say whatever you want. At the end of it, we're going to have to come to some agreements, and you're just slowing us down to get to that agreements because you want to pound your chest metaphorically. And there's
right.
I mean, and as a leader, he's one of my oldest mentors. He was a platoon commander of mine, and we walked in. He goes, "Hey, we all have an equal opportunity to die. So at least for the foreseeable future, while we're discussing this, we're all going to have equal input as to what we're going to do. And at the end of it, once we're done, we're all moving on with that."
Right.
And, we always joke, and there was an old Vietnam vet one time, we were talking about the officers, and he goes, everybody's got a job. My job was carrying the machine gun. His job was this. It's the old Vietnam guys sitting around together, in their 60s and 70s at the time, and just telling some great stories to all us young kids. And I go, well, what about the officer? He goes, his job was making decisions. He was a good decision maker. Right? That was literally, it wasn't about him being superior in grade to them or anything else. It was like, yeah, we let him exist in our tribe as a good decision maker.
Yeah, right. Right.
And I'm like, what a great way to put that, right? Because that's the value that he brought to the trot. He took input, and it only works if you accept input from everybody and they feel you're genuine while you're doing it.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. Because when he made a decision, they felt he was making that decision in full bloom of everything they had given him in input. And they were comfortable with the fact that, hey, he didn't accept in totality my opinion, but I can see some of it sprinkled in there, and he's thinking about things that he has a view that we don't. And I think that is today, when society gets angry, that's what they forget about. Like, I gotta have my way.
Yeah, right.
Why do you do that? You know, why would I get to pick, right? I mean, there's certain things you probably want my opinion on, but there's a significant portion of what goes on where I'm like, I probably don't need to make that decision.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I want an opportunity to articulate a well-reasoned opinion. And then really, I want to detach myself unless I'm the one making the decision, so that I can think about other stuff too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's that shift from it has to be all about me and what I feel, and that's the leaning forward, and you know what I mean? Versus, hey, look, you're asking my opinion, so I'm giving it to you. Here's my rationale for it. You're the decision maker. You decide. I have no problem with that.
Right.
Because I got other cool shit to do too.
You're this much of my day, not my day.
Yeah, right.
I want to help you out. I want to help you out. I want to think, but are you comfortable now? We have to move forward. Right. I think, like, if you look at Duke basketball, he's the master at that. I was reading an article, and then I saw it he was talking about it on some show where they went into the locker room at halftime, and one of his, star players, top 5 kid in the nation, was just having a bad game. And he went up and he got the kid he's going to put into the game, who's, has been on the bench the first half, and he got this star. And he said, here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. And the one kid didn't want to, he knew that it would be uncomfortable for him just to basically go get on the end of the bench and jump in because the dynamic, but he's not like, he had to do it, but he didn't have to do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, he could have just made the blank, hey, I'm in charge and I'm going to go do this. But he got them together in the locker room for a couple minutes, and he looks and he goes, Bobby, are you okay? Johnny, are you okay? So we're okay with this decision together. And he gave them all buy-in, and they came out, and then they, worked everybody back in. But it was like, sometimes you have to stop and take this much of your day to get people to buy into what you want. Your kids, right? Like, it can't be, hey, do this, go do that. Well, there's certain metrics by the time they're teenagers where, and I don't do this well at all. Sometimes it's like, clean your room, right? You gotta clean your room. And then someone's like, I don't care. Like, I really don't. Like, if you want to live like a pig, as long as there's not food stuffed up there with varmints and stuff coming into the thing, if you want to hop across your clothes on the way to your bed every day, at some point, I just don't care. Right? Because it's not important to me. Right? I mean, maybe it should be. Right? But what I've seen is, I had a 14-year-old who's now a 20-year-old who was pig pen, but now that he's out on his own, he's got his own place. He cleans, he vacuums, he changes the sheets. Because it's like when he was 14, the sheets looked like the Shroud of Turin. He was like, I was like trying to get that right. But that, I think, is, and some of it comes with age and maturity. Is it's why they always say, like, subsequent children, the first kid gets all the abuse, and the subsequent kids, it's like, whatever. The kids are, the pacifier hits the dirt with the first one, and you're in there getting the next one that's hermetically sealed, so the child doesn't do it. And then by the second or third kids, my friends might have 6 kids. They're like, you can't kill them. That's what, like, one of the ones, like, they just want to live. You can't kill them. Trust me. After 2 or 3, just let them roam around.
You're right. Yeah, they're pretty resilient, man.
Right. Like you said, you've got to protect them for the first year or so, just because their skull's soft and everything like that. But short of putting a helmet on them, and 24/7. But when they get a little bit older, we can have it. Your kids, I think, ultimately now moving out of the city and kind of getting a more bucolic lifestyle, they're going to consume more dirt. They're going to breathe more things outside. They're going to be much more resilient to allergies, disease, and everything else because they're experiencing it at a low dose exposure. I mean, minerals in our diet, right? We wash and clean everything within his life. Well, when I was a kid, we used to go in the backyard and, pick a vegetable, pick a thing, and just eat it. Yeah, right. I worked at a farm. We just take tomatoes off the vine, bite into it with one thing, like an apple, put a little bit of salt on it, and eat it.
Yeah.
Right. And it was dirt. There's probably a little bit of fertilizer. There's a little bit of everything. Right. But we weren't trying to childproof kids.
That's right. Yeah,
right?
well, you let them be as they are. Yeah.
I mean, when I was a kid, my mom came out, like, I'd go in underneath the sink and, like, I went in the fridge and yanked a bunch of eggs out there all on the ground. So then I thought my good idea was, as a 3-year-old, was to clean it up. I went there and pushed half a container of dishwashing liquid on the floor, thereby exponentially multiplying the cleanup problem.
Right.
Now, what do we got? All those things are child locked. So a kid can't even open it up. All right. So there's don't touch.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell you. It's like, and then there's, okay, are we going to lose track of the kid?
You're right. Yeah, exactly.
Around here, we just had another kid left in the car. I mean, I may be the strange one, but I never, ever was in a car and didn't realize my children were in there. Like, halfway into the store, oh God, I got a kid in the car. Like, no, like, because you're taught, what level of disengagement do you have to have, right? And I'm not harsh on it because I get people have issues and everything like that, but what level of disengagement do you have where you put another human in the back of your car and go, oh, time to get some groceries?
Yeah, right. Like, I'll lose my car keys, but I don't know that I've ever lost track of another human being around me.
No.
I mean, even like in inebriated states, you know what I mean? Where you're like, your consciousness is altered a little bit. Yeah. You're still like at least tangentially aware of, well, yeah, that person's right there.
Especially if it's a little human, there's only one thing they're depending on, and that's you not to let them hurt themselves.
Right. And they're not exactly quiet. I mean,
no. Especially like now, I mean, your daughter's probably in that chatty Cathy mode where why, which is the best line. Because when Jared was a little guy, because it was my first child, I was waiting for him, like for years. Daddy, why is the sky blue? And I had the whole, and it was like, I wanted to talk about the index of refraction and reflection and all the multiple layers of the atmosphere and everything like that. And when he asked me, I was like, yeah. And about 2 sentences into it, he's like, hey, look, Dad, there's a booger on the end of my hand, kind of thing. It's like, wasn't the great parent moment I wanted it, right?
Yeah, but it builds, man. I love those moments. Personally.
I do too.
I mean, Of course it's tiring. Of course there's times where I'm like, man, I'm tired, dude. I don't want to hear this. But you're aware of what the situation is for what it is, right? And you're like, yeah,
just like everything else. Some days you're an A+ parent. Some days you're a C- parent. You just hope you don't, just hope your whole life revolves around 2.0 and go with parenting, right? You're at least at 2.0 or above, right?
Right.
And, you move into the D's and F's when you get out and leave your kid in the car.
Yeah.
Right. How many times have you heard like, oh, I got out, ran to a 7-Eleven, left the car running, left the child in there, and then somebody hops in the car and takes the car.
Right. Yeah, I really don't understand how that can happen.
But then the person's like, well, that guy's the bad guy. Well, he's the bad guy for stealing a car, but you left the getaway car with the keys, with everything else, right? Hey, you Wile E. Coyote this guy into the thing, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
And I guarantee you, he probably did not want to leave with a child in the car.
Well, and so here's the other side of it too, man. And I got some plants to take care of in a minute. This is the other thing I think about too. Okay, so let's look at the other side for a moment. Let's say that for some reason, there's this epidemic of disassociated, it seems to me that it's typically mothers, disassociated mothers that leads to these events happening. Well, what in the fuck are we doing as a society that's leading to this epidemic?
Right.
Right? I mean,
what's put in front of you that's so thing that you're like, what was I? Was out here? What was I doing? Who was I? Oh yeah, I got a child with me, right?
Yeah.
It pushes you that far off. I mean, and it is. That's the when you get down to it, and you don't just want to scream and rage because there's some child got left in the car and died, right? You just want to go, how? You don't just get out of your house and walk to the end of the driveway and get to that state. There's a long walk mentally that you're taking to get there, right?
That's right. Yeah. It's not a momentary lapse in judgment.
No,
it's an accretion of what my 4-year-old would call red decision making. And her big thing now is, Daddy, you said a bad word. And so I tried to explain why it is I think I do that, not to excuse it, but to try and provide history, right?
Right.
Daddy, when you say those bad words, you're making red decisions. I'm like, what in the fuck is a red decision? She's like, you said a bad word.
Green decisions are Daddy gave me ice cream.
Yeah, right.
The yellow one is telling me what time I have to go to bed.
Oh man. Speaking of green, dude, I gotta go take care of some plants before this next storm rolls in. I don't know what kind of rain you're getting. We destroyed
around the beach. It wasn't too bad. A little bit west and north of us, they were getting 5-6 inches of rain. In a very short period of time, having some flooding.
Yeah, yeah,
Grow,
yeah.
grow some ghost peppers, man.
Dude, the seeds aren't here yet, but I got a plot cleared for them. I'm gonna take like maybe a quarter or a half of the seeds and put them in to see if I can actually get them to germinate.
Yeah.
We're late in the season.
Yeah.
But we've already started planning ahead for it. We'll definitely grow them, man. It's not.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I got ready-made business for you on that one. If your wife wants to sell vegetables and stuff like that, and if you guys, for peppers, if you guys have a dehydrator for those peppers and you could sell the powder, magic.
Yeah, we do.
I'll be sprinkling on everything.
Right on, man. It'll be my first beta test.
There you go. It's what my life is. One big beta test, right?
Well,
Hey, have a great week.
You too, man. I'll talk to you later.
Right,
Cheers,
yeah,
everybody. Bye-bye.